Here are 5 writing tips from one of the greatest authors of all time, Stephen King. I recently reread his book on writing, and I tried to pick 5 pieces of writing advice that aren't very widely talked about. So unless you've read the book, these are 5 tips that you probably haven't heard of, but that doesn't make them any less useful. But if you're new here and you love stories and storytelling tips and writing and all that jazz, then consider subscribing and hitting the bell, because that's what I mainly make content about. The first tip is to avoid too much backstory. Everyone has a history, and most of it actually isn't that interesting. It's good to write backstories for your characters, but you should do it because you, as the writer, want to understand your characters better. For the writer, when you're writing the backstory, it might seem interesting to write about the backstory, but if you think about it from the reader's perspective, you, as a reader, you probably don't care that much about the backstory unless it's a really interesting backstory. It's better to just leave it out. Number 2 is you can bend and even break the rules of grammar if you want to. Stephen King says the object of fiction isn't grammatical correctness, but to make the reader welcome and then tell a story. One of my favourite authors, Joe Abercrombie, uses a lot of grammatically incomplete sentences that sound so much better because they are incorrect. Here are a few examples. The great hands snatched at his body, but all the giant caught was laughter. Easier to strike the flickering fire, easier to catch the rolling smoke. Now, to be grammatically correct, he should have said it was easier to strike the flickering fire. It was easier to catch the rolling smoke. But obviously, the first sentence sounds much better. By removing the words it was, it adds the much needed sense of urgency that should be present in a fight scene. Or, for example, the sentence, "The hiss became a growl, iron spattering from a forge." To be more grammatically correct, it should have been, "The hiss became a growl, like iron spattering from the forge." Simply, by removing one short word, it makes a big difference, and I'm sure you'll agree that the first sentence is much more exciting. The third tip is to take risks. The beautiful thing about writing is that you can write about anything, and the freedom you have is literally boundless. Imagine standing on the edge of a cliff and being able to jump off the cliff without fear of injuring yourself. That should be the attitude you have with writing. And Stephen King writes, if it works, then that's fine. If it doesn't, toss it. You're not going to get any better or worse by worrying about it. And there's no need to worry about what you write, because like he said, if it doesn't work, you can just delete it, and no one's going to ever know. For my fantasy novel that I'm writing, I delete easily more than half of everything that I write, and it's totally fine. It's the same with my YouTube channel. Less than half of what I actually create ends up on my channel. So the fourth tip is don't over-describe. In many cases, when a reader puts a story aside, it's because it got boring. The boredom arose because the writer grew enchanted with his powers of description and lost sight of his priority, which is to keep the ball rolling. Now, although over-describing is much more common, it's possible to under-describe as well, and meeting the balance of keeping the ball rolling while not making it too simplistic is something you have to kind of sense. And the only way to develop that sensitivity, to know when to stop describing something, is by reading a lot. Because by reading a lot, you can see what description works, and also what doesn't work, and this also applies to anything else, like dialogue, story structure, character work. Actually, by reading bad books, it can actually be just as helpful because you can see what doesn't work. And that enables you to improve your description and literally every other aspect of writing. And that is why Stephen King also says, if you want to be a writer, you must do 2 things above all others: read a lot and write a lot. And he also said, you cannot hope to sweep someone else away by the force of your writing until it has been done to you. The 5th tip is to write for yourself. When you write a story, you're telling yourself the story. When you rewrite, your main job is taking out all the things that are not the story, and your stuff starts out being just for you, but then it goes out. So when you're writing your first draft, it should be something that you would enjoy, not someone else would enjoy, not your family or your friends, just you. You can make it whatever you want it to be, and then after the first draft is done, you can ask other people if they like it, and from there you can take out the parts that are bad and leave the parts that are good. So for the first draft, it's better to save yourself the worry of other people's opinions, and then after the first draft is done, you can see what other people think and just change whatever doesn't work. And it's actually just as simple as that. The hard part is just starting to write every day, and the rest of it is just taking out what's bad and leaving what's good. That's literally it. The more you write, the more good stuff you're probably gonna have at the end of the day. So those were just 5 pieces of writing advice from the book On Writing by Stephen King. I barely scratched the surface of this incredible book, and I'm certainly gonna reread it again and again throughout my writing life. So if you want to check it out, then the link is in the description. I hope you have an amazing day, and I'll see you in the next video. Goodbye.